And here we go.
That's the clap with the hands, Pete, as opposed to the other clap.
Where are you I know it's always parts unknown. Everybody always wants to know. It's kind of like a joke and anything, but where the hell are you?
Greenwich, Connecticut.
No way. Really?
Yeah. I practically went right by your old house, Pete, getting here. As you know, Darien, Rowayton, Greenwich, all that fun stuff.
Yeah. It's beautiful. Oh, you're in God's country up there. I mean, some weird people, but with a lot of
ticks.
Let me tell you this. When you're already a little odd and then you add a lot of money, it turns into a real hubbub of a thing. I don't miss it. I'll say that.
Well, but he's a rebel, folks. So, of course, you can only imagine how much a guy that looks like Pete and acts like Pete would be a rebel in a town like New Canaan, where he used to live, John, where everything's kind of stayed. And
John, these guys still to this day got the pop collars. They've got the, the little whales on their belts. And meanwhile, I'm walking down the street, usually in a tank top and swim trunks going, hey, get out of my way. No, I'm just kidding. I definitely was a fish out of water.
There was definitely some interesting stuff going on there. Well, you have tuned in for the Rebel Edge. Our friend Tom Gronkowski, Gronk's little brother, is handling the video. And the reason that we had to change, of course, was that our other videographer, Jared, was unavailable due to basically helping his wife get through some health issues. And we continue to hope that those issues are being resolved and that we look forward to having him back. But Gronk has done yeoman's work, and we appreciate it, Tom. Thank you. So we don't have the columns down the side, folks, and the clock and all that. You could let us know, hey, I don't like that stuff anyway. Or I think most of you have actually responded, hey, when are you bringing that stuff back? And we will.
I like it. This kind of combines what sports are there, and that whole world, John. And let's be honest. I mean, I don't know how many guys in the financial world have two guys on the same show that happen to be brothers who happen to play in the NFL, but also went right into the stock market on the option side of things. So I think it does create that uniqueness. And I like those little panels. Kind of gives everybody a little heads up what's coming next.
I like them too, Pete. So this is the Rebel's Edge. He is Pete Najarian. I'm John Najarian. And we're going to start off with the Macro Minute. And the Macro Minute really is PPI today, which is Producer Price Index. Yesterday it was CPI, which was hotter than expected. Today it's PPI, almost double what was expected, Pete. 0.7 versus 0.4 was what they expected to see the increase in producer prices. And my gosh, we basically spit in the eye of both of those numbers, yesterday's and today's, Pete.
Well, and John, I'm going to go a little bit of different direction, a direction I haven't gone in a long time, but I'm going to go to the volatility index. And why would I do that? Well, it's been going down, 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 because when you look at these markets, it's becoming a narrower and narrower range each and every day. It doesn't mean we don't still have some volatility, but take a look at that volatility index. It's now today hit underneath 13. Now it's above 13 this moment, but 1298 was the low so far today. It'll be interesting to see as we get into tomorrow, if these markets stay the same, volatility is getting pulled out. And I would say we go into the weekend, John, somewhere closer to the mid 12s, which will be very interesting because we haven't seen those numbers in quite some time. Matter of fact, you got to go back quite a ways to get into those 12s.
Yeah, that's a fact. And I don't know that we should be in those 12s, Pete, if your read and my read are correct on producer prices and CPI being a little hot. Even our buddy Ken Griffith over at Citadel was on TV talking about, man, the Fed's going to have to keep hitting it. And he said, but I don't know if we can get back down to 2 for several years, was his opinion, Pete.
Wow.
Ouch. All right. Well, today we did have a big IPO, initial public offering. It was ARM Holdings. This is a chip designer, and they're one of the most interesting chips in the world because they almost were able to finish a deal with NVIDIA before they even came public. But then regulators kind of stepped in and said, you know, you guys are big enough already. We don't know that we need to let you merge in with the biggest, NVIDIA. So, but this IPO, Pete, was much heralded, and it's a $54 billion IPO.
It's a monster, John. Real quick, I am going to hit one thing. Fantastic futures. You skipped over it real quick, and I think it's really important to just say this. Yes, crude oil got over 90 today. And John and I have been all over this thing. It started in July. We were 60, 66, 68, whatever. And now here we are at 90. And John, that ties all the way back to all these other things that we're talking about, PPI and CPI and all the rest of this. You know, you look at food and energy, and that has been the area that people are definitely focused on. When I get back now to ARM Holding, tell you what's really interesting is when they went private with SoftBank, John, they went private at 32 billion. And now today they're going back IPO at a 54.5 billion. Seems like a pretty nice trade. I don't know. You know, you and I like to have nice trades here and there. That seemed like a pretty damn good trade. And you know who the winner is? Not outside of just SoftBank and obviously ARM. I think the winner is the NASDAQ because they outdueled the New York Stock Exchange and got this listing. And that's a big one, John. It's going to be some massive volume, I would expect.
I agree, Pete. And to your point, when it was taken private at 32, they kind of, at least at the time, seemed to have really overpaid. SoftBank did. And then they tried to do that deal with NVIDIA, and that was going to be a huge deal. But the regulators, like I said previously, blocked it. Antitrust regulators saying that's not going to fly. And now they're in at 54 billion, 54.5 billion based on the price of it today. So we'll see where the first trade is, Pete. Hasn't traded yet, but they keep saying it's going to be around 58, and it's a 51 price. So that'd be a $7 jump. That's not bad. I probably wouldn't chase it there, though.
I would agree with you on that one. But this is a monster. It's the biggest IPO of this year. So it's a monster.
Let's talk about Ivanhoe Electric, Pete. Up strong. The executive chairman and president, chief officer, they all got together, and they're pricing and underwriting of 11.8 million shares. Now, most of you understand when you do something like that, you're diluting the stock. But it is what public markets are for. You know, you can go out there and raise money in that way, offer additional shares, and frequently it will result in those shares trading lower when you do that. That's exactly what is happening in Ivanhoe. It's down about 12% on heavy volume today of those extra 11.5 million or 11.8 million shares coming to market, Pete.
Yeah, 5 times normal value in the first 2 hours of the day, John. That's a trade, rather, not value, volume. So a monstrous day for them. It's really huge. That being said, to your point, that's exactly why it's down 12%, because where were they announcing their public offering? 1350. You know where the stock is? It's right around 1350, which is a pretty decent step below where it was. So it's interesting to see how this whole thing plays out. They've got a pretty good market cap, John, call it a little over $1 billion. Their cash burns $136 million. Outside of that, they don't make any money. These guys, you know, it's one of those, once again, where, all right, well, you know, you've been around a little while. When are you guys going to start to make some real money or any money? And they haven't been able to do it yet. This mineral exploration, all the rest of it that they're involved with. But this is not one that I'm terribly interested in, to be honest with you, John. Could it bounce back? Sure, it could. But I think there's a lot of other places that I'd rather be trying to find that bounce outside of Ivanhoe Electric.
Right there with you. All right, let's talk about AMC and the apes. Because AMC shares, that's, of course, the entertainment company. They have all those cinemas and so forth. They're garnering about a 325 million in new equity capital, Pete, through the sale of 40 million shares. All right. So just like we said with Ivanhoe, but now that they've completed this and now that they've raised an additional $300 million, you wouldn't be a bit surprised, Pete, to see that maybe some of the other things that people were worried about are pushed aside. Now they're talking about Oppenheimer, Barbie, and then Taylor Swift's concert that's going to be coming to these theaters.
Yeah, they do still have that streaming competition, John, but you're right. I mean, we finally started to see something happening where there's actually movies that people want to go see and they want to go to these cinemas. And people still do love the social aspect of that, laughing or smiling or crying or whatever with everybody else in the room. And that's something I think that we lost in the pandemic. They're making it back. The problem for me still with AMC, John, it doesn't mean it can't go up, but they've got debt to cash of $9 billion. They got a cash burn of nearly 200 million. They've got shorts of about 14%. Could this short squeeze? Absolutely, this stock could short squeeze. We've seen it before. But if you look at the year to date, John, or the 52 week, I should say, the stock was $103 at the high. That was almost exactly a year ago. And then it just went, duh, 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 duh. And then here we are today trading underneath $9. So I would say this, they got to show us that they can figure out a way to make money again. And if they can ever turn that part of it around, then I'm going to be impressed enough to maybe be there for something other than a short squeeze. But otherwise, I am not going to chase this name.
Yeah. Well, it is one of those, Pete, that it gets in the headlines just like GameStop does. But this is one of those that the pandemic really focused a lot of investor interest on this stock. Let me throw one out to you, Pete, even though we didn't really get a chance to discuss it, but it's just moving so much. Carvana, CVNA, it's up about 13% today. That's a big move, but you know what? It was up over 28% in the past month. So do you remember, Pete, when you and I were talking about it and they took it all down to was the low in the single digits, Pete?
Yeah, it was.
It was down below $4. Well, they came in, they were buying calls and they've kept buying calls and the stock keeps going up. Today, that stock's $56. That's got to be one of the biggest windfalls in the last 52 weeks of any stock.
Well, when you've got 45% of the float short, that's something that gives you a lot of opportunity for what we were just talking about, which is the squeeze. And the squeeze has been going on for a while. John, these guys don't make money. They haven't made money. And there's a real problem there, which is why it made sense when it went down. But it also makes sense going to the upside because, as you and I both know, we've watched this play out over the last, call it 3 or 4 years now, where meme stocks, whatever you want to call them, but those with high short interest, there's always the danger that those shorts are going to start getting squeezed. And we are seeing it happen in Carvana on a fairly regular basis. And you're right. I mean, single digits to $56, that's one hell of a run. And it's not a stock where they suddenly came out and said, you know what? Our sales are just booming. We are killing it. We got better stuff than anybody else in the industry. That's really not what's been going on. But with those shorts having to chase, nervous, chase, that's exactly what we're seeing happening right now. And it's what can happen. And it's what we were just talking about that with AMC, right, John? I mean, it was 103. Why was it 103? Were they making money a year ago? No.
Nope.
But they got squeezed and now they're getting less squeezed. And because of that, that's why that stock has been going like this. Carvana's been going like that. The squeeze is on.
Yeah, I mean, it was $4, folks, in January of this year. So this is one of those where we are indeed talking about a 10x, Pete, and then some from that level. I mean, holy crap.
Oh,
that's
amazing.
it. Pull it up, folks. CVNA, Carvana.
Yep.
And then look at the turnover of shares today. Almost 13 million right now. That's a lot of turnover. All right, let's talk a little bit about sports, Pete. This is one of the favorite parts of the show. And it's Thursday night football, and your Vikings are part of it.
Yeah, the Vikings, who are 0-1, by the way, and the Eagles, who are 1-0, but it wasn't all that impressive if you actually just look up at the game, not just the first quarter. First quarter, they were absolutely dominant last week and against New England. And all of a sudden, they just kind of looked really average, John. And on top of that, they got a whole mash unit going on right now with the Eagles. They got their running back out to Gainwell. They got a cornerback out in Bradbury. They got a safety out in Blankenship. By the way, that kid is really good. I mean, he's a hell of a safety. Linebacker, Nakobe Dean is now on the injured reserve. He's probably not going to play this year. He got hurt earlier in the year before this past game. But they are a mash unit. And then you've got Kirk Cousins, who absolutely lit up the Buccaneers. Problem was he couldn't figure out how to get touchdowns, John. So they were short on touchdowns, but really long on a lot of yards. And let me tell you, my three sons, as everybody here in Minnesota is calling it, you've got Justin Jefferson's son, you've got Hawkins' son, and you've got Addis' son. Those three guys put together a game that was pretty good, John. They had 250 yards between the three of them. And JJ, who's still waiting on his contract, he will get the biggest contract in NFL history for wide receivers, that's for sure, at some point. And they talk about it every day in Minnesota. He was 9 for 150 yards. The problem was no touchdowns. And so that's an issue, but Minnesota kept turning the ball over. The Eagles also had some turnovers themselves. They didn't play as good in the second, third, and fourth quarter, John. They just didn't look the same team that they did in the first quarter when they absolutely dominated. They had interceptions. They had New England on the ropes. This should be a pretty fun game. I think it's, what scares me for the Vikings, their offensive line, in my opinion, is awful. And Kirk is going to get hit a lot because that defense for the Eagles is the same defense as last year. They are big. They're good. That front seven is mean, but they've got a lot of injuries behind them. So maybe Kirk can take advantage of that. Maybe he gets the ball to JJ in the end zone instead of just throwing it around and just going between the 20s is great, but getting inside the 20 and getting into the, the actual, end zone, that's what really matters.
Yeah. And Pete, it's an early game because Thursday night games generally are. It's 7 p.m. Eastern time at Lincoln Stadium, Lincoln Financial Field, I guess they call it in Philly. But, it's not on broadcast television. It's only on Amazon. So if you have an Amazon Fire device, you're good. If you have any of these Amazon devices that let you, whether it's, you've got Amazon Prime on your TV or Fire TV or a Fire tablet, yeah, you can watch the game. But if you don't, you're out of luck. So this is one of those greedy things that the NFL has done, Pete, by taking it off free TV completely. Now, we know that, of course, ESPN had carried, some games that were exclusive.
Well, it looks like John kind of froze up for right now, so I'll jump in. He's right. It's going to be limited, and it's going to be something that we started having to deal with this like a year or so ago, and now it's still something we have to face. Now, we're going to finish up with some college football, and I'll just handle it real quick from here. You've got Washington, number 8 in the country. By the way, the Pac-12, despite the fact that they are completely dismantling them by next year, they are looking really good this year. As a matter of fact, as far as conferences go, they might be the best conference in all of college football, better than the SEC. I know you guys, the haters will come at me, but right now, that's who they are. USC, UCLA, Washington State, all of these various teams, Oregon, even Oregon State, Cal, not as much, Stanford, definitely not as much. But when you look around the Pac-12, there are some great teams. And of course, Colorado's still in there right now. And so is Utah as well. And Utah looks special. But Washington, number 8 in the country, going to Michigan State. Michigan State's got a coach, a guy by the name of Mel Tucker, who has found himself in a harassment suspension issue that will probably play out for most of this season, would be my guess. And that part's awful. But back to the football side of things, they got a great running back. If they can control the ball, they have a great opportunity with Nathan Carter. On the other side of the things, you've got Michael Penix, a quarterback for Washington. Here's the interesting thing. He had a great career at Indiana, then went to Washington, lit it up last year. He's lighting it up this year just in the first couple of games. He's got 8 touchdowns, 1 interception. I mean, this guy is special, and he's got some great receivers. Now, outside of that, when I'm looking for what I think are the best games, I might be biased, but I think this really comes into play. My Golden Gophers, that's where I played long ago under Lou Holtz, and we actually had a pretty daggone good team my last year, beat Clemson in a bowl game, but they're going to Chapel Hill. The Golden Gophers are going to Chapel Hill, North Carolina. They got one of the better quarterbacks in all of football, but so far this year, first two games, he's looked terrible. Let's be honest. He has not looked like the guy who he was last year as a freshman. You'd think he'd make the next step. And this is a guy who's projected to be the number 3 pick in the NFL draft. We'll see if that happens. He's going to have to get a lot better. But my Golden Gophers on defense, they've generally been in the top 5 in defense in a lot of different categories for the last couple of years. And this year is no different. They are playing extremely well. There's a running back for North Carolina named Hampton who is lighting it up. And if the Gophers can stop him and slow down that quarterback, we may have a chance. And I think that could be a fun game because North Carolina is ranked number 20. They're at home. There might be some rain. Who knows because of all these storms. Storm Lee right now coming through. But the Golden Gophers got a quarterback who can throw the ball, and we found a running back last week who can really run it. Ran for almost 190 yards. So those are your two games that I think are the best games of this weekend. Folks, we really appreciate you watching the Rebels Edge. I'm sorry we lost John at the end. We've had a whole week of craziness, but my man Gronk is on top of it. He's done a great job for us. We really appreciate it. We may have Gronk next week. We may not. Maybe we see Jared back. Not really sure. Maybe we see John back. That would be interesting as well. Anyway, you have a great rest of your week, and we'll see you on Monday, 1 p.m. Eastern Time.